We could probably all agree that society's never going to be totally equal. Maybe we don't even want it to be totally equal. So then what is the sweet spot for income inequality? Was there a golden age in American history, or is there another place that's doing it better than us? So
look, I think it's fallacious to talk about a golden age of anything.
Okay.
But it's clear that in the 1940s, 1950s, 1960s, really up to the mid-1970s, it was a very different kind of economy. The top 1% in the 1970s was taking home no more than 9% of total income. By the time we got to 2007, the top 1% was taking home 23.5% of total income. I mean, that is a huge difference. The trend is happening everywhere, but among advanced countries, developed countries, we are the outlier. We are so much more unequal than anybody else. And yet, what do we have to show for it? I mean, the economic growth is not noticeably faster over the last 25 or 30 years than it has been elsewhere. Yeah. And we have more poverty. Infant mortality is worse. We spend more on healthcare and get less for it. And we have, again, huge amount of economic insecurity.
Incentives really run an economy, right? And if you look at the student loan issue, in 2003, 2004, the amount of student loans in the United States were around 300 billion, and now we're up to $1 trillion. And if you look at the amount of people that have gone on welfare and the amount of people on disability, now granted, we have to provide for the needy, God, we must, but it seems like there's this explosion of people that are almost setting up, I think, an unstable situation in our society. 31 states, the minimum wage versus being on welfare is less. So you're better off being on welfare. So you have a growing group of incentives that are, I think, creating some of this problem. They're almost suppressing people to not achieve their greatness that's inside of them.
For one thing, student loans have exploded. Why? Because most states, with regard to public higher education, that's where 80% of our kids go, have pulled way, way back on funding public higher education, meaning that tuitions have skyrocketed. The only way that people of moderate means, kids from moderate families and below, can possibly afford it is by taking out more and more student loans. The fact that there are student loans is not a sign of people using or taking advantage of the government. The fact that there are so much student loans is a sign of the government actually not providing the supports it used to provide. Number two, you say that somehow we have this vast welfare state that makes it easier for people not to work. The fact of the matter is, the reason we have so many people on food stamps, the reason we have so many people who are working who are getting nowhere, is because right now the typical worker is earning far less than the typical worker did, adjusted for inflation, 10 or 15 years ago. Most of the new jobs created since the Great Recession pay less than the jobs we had before.
Mark, you've been traveling the world looking at, various social movements in other countries. Is there a place that's doing it better than us?
Well, yeah, responding to your question of sort of the right amount of economic income inequality, I mean, I think if we look at, for example, the 2008 financial downturn, we can see that part of the reason that it was called a crisis is that economic tumult finally reached the middle class, whereas it hadn't for a while. There was a sense that people who thought they were immune from it were now facing tough choices. And so, sometimes the discourse around the right amount of inequality is a way to mask the sense that we want to return to an era where only working people struggle, where those who are supposed to be poor are poor, and everyone else can sort of go along with their day and feel good about themselves. Yeah, I spent a lot of time in Spain and Greece and Colombia, and some people point to sort of the European social democratic model as the way to go with things. But I think that we've seen where we have countries where socialist parties have enacted austerity measures, as they have in Spain and Greece, that simply, the people there have given up on that. There's a sense that both of the main political parties are the same, and so people are organizing social centers where there are food pantries, there's place for clothing, and people can organize anti-foreclosure movements, and there's a sense that they're creating democracy at a local level, which to me is the only sustainable long way to really challenge something that the system which pretty much goes back and forth.